Good afternoon, good morning, everyone. Thank you all for joining. Sorry for the slight delay in getting started. This is Jeff Vail speaking. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of WGroup. I'm excited to be one of your hosts for today's broadcast, which is co-sponsored by WGroup and Neuron. It's entitled, as you can see by the cover slide here, Better Insight, Automated Action Despite Technical Debt. And I am joined today by Neuron's Chief Technology Officer, Tom Fountain. Tom, say hi.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining.
So before we begin, I just want to cover off on a couple of housekeeping details. First, because there are so many registrants for today's webcast, everybody will be on mute, including during the Q&A session. So what we encourage you to do is submit your questions at any time, however, using the questions button on the webinar control panel, as you can see on this slide here. We will try to answer all your questions during the broadcast. And however, in the event that we happen to run out of time before we get to all of your questions, we promise to respond to any and all questions via email at the conclusion of the broadcast. We will be live tweeting throughout the session and ask you to join the conversation. Using the Twitter handle here, you can see #ITSpeedWebcast. Also, if I go back to the earlier slide, I also want to let you know that our Twitter handles are always live at ThinkWGroup and at Neuron Corp. So you can feel free to join the conversation with us at any time. The webcast is being recorded, and all registrants will receive the web address for the recorded version at the conclusion of the webcast. So as I mentioned earlier, the webcast today is sponsored by WGroup and Neuron, so I thought it'd be a good idea to give you a little bit of background about the speakers as well as the companies that we represent before we dive into the content. I said earlier, my name is Jeff Vail. I'm the Chief Operating Officer of WGroup. I've been in the IT industry for about 20 years, which include stretches of time in executive capacities with Unisys, with SAP. I was with Siemens. I was also Chief Commercial Officer for a supply chain planning company called Quintic before I joined WGroup. Let me tell you a little bit about WGroup. WGroup was founded in 2004. We're an IT consulting firm based just outside of Philadelphia, supporting clients all across principally North America. We have 4 primary areas of focus in our business. The first is IT strategy. The second is service delivery transformation, including outsourcing advisory services, which is often critical to service delivery for many large businesses. It includes transformation projects, things like data center moves and consolidation, migration to the cloud, lots of big ticket projects that many of you would be dealing with, and risk mitigation. One of the things that makes our firm unique is that most of our consultants have been CIOs or IT leaders at businesses and been in seats responsible for IT service delivery. So that gives them a unique perspective to serve as a trusted advisor to IT leaders as they transform for the future. I also want to introduce to you as well Tom Fountain, who I mentioned is my co-host for today. He today is the CTO of Neuron. He was previously CIO of global agribusiness Bunge Limited. He's held senior CIO roles at Honeywell and GE as well, and he's held the positions of product manager, intelligence officer, and engineering positions with companies like Dell, HP, and Martin Marietta, and he was also with the Central Intelligence Agency. I'll tell you a little bit about his company, but he's going to spend quite a bit of time in the webcast telling you a little bit more. But at a very high level, I can describe Neuron as a company that was founded in 2010. Their business orchestration software enables organizations to leverage existing applications, infrastructure, services, and data to create and deliver actionable intelligence in generally half the time and cost. Its customers are no longer faced with complex centralization and integration requirements of traditional approaches. That's the elevator speech, but as I said, Tom will tell you plenty more as we move through the program. So let's get into it. Now, most of you know that the world has changed quite dramatically in recent years and continues to change at an ever increasing pace. We all know that once upon a time, if you were a large enterprise and you had significant scale, that was a tremendous advantage. It was a tremendous advantage from small players trying to enter the market. There were significant barriers to entry. And that the world isn't really like that way. It doesn't work that way anymore. It's no longer the case. Every business, both big and small, is under constant attack from small players that can scale very quickly. They have the ability to adopt cloud infrastructures, create applications that can be a significant threat to most large organizations. In fact, what that means is if you're a large organization with scale and significant heritage, it's often a disadvantage rather than an advantage in today's business. At the same time, just because fast eats the slow doesn't necessarily mean that a large enterprise can't also be fast. So can big and fast be big and small? Yes, of course. So what we're going to talk about today is how, in general, large enterprises can speed up when it comes to IT services. And this theme resonates in almost every discussion that I have with IT leaders. In some way, shape, or form, the theme of speed, enterprise speed, IT speed, seems to be a red thread in almost every conversation that you have. Whether or not it's modernization to get newer, whether or not it's cloud because you want to move on from having to deal with hardware and software, and because it's just easier to adopt cloud, whether it's infrastructure or applications, or whether or not it's multimodal IT in order to set a fence around a set of people that are responsible for innovation and the faster parts of delivering IT services to the business. We talk about Agile, we talk about DevOps, and clearly it's even in the name. It's about speeding up application delivery. And then automation, same idea. How do we stop doing repeatable tasks? So this idea of speed, whether or not everybody's using the word speed, all the themes that exist in our market today are all about accelerating the pace of the business and the need for technology in order to support that acceleration. And that's the good news for all of us, and that this acceleration requires technology in order to be successful. Now, every large organization kind of has an unfortunate reality, and there's this sort of ball and chain associated with the legacy infrastructure that exists. You can only go so fast if you can accept the information that's in the legacy systems that have, there's so much investment that has gone into that. The business logic, the core customer data is in there. It's locked in there. We've also spent a long time over the years trying to put governance in place to make sure that IT is operating on priority. And so when it comes to speeding up, adopting new innovations, often these governance processes can slow us down. And then lastly, the one thing that can really kill speed and innovation is culture. And I often get asked the question, how do we be more Amazon-like, or how do we be more Google-like? And the answer often is that these are organizations that have cultures that embrace speed, innovation, accept fast failure, accept that as part of the standard culture of the business, and the actions of the leadership are constantly creating innovation and a drive to business betterment. And that to me, I think, is a key thing. Now, at the end of this piece here, I'm going to hand it off to Tom. And one of the things that we constantly look for as we help organizations grapple with the processes, the people, and the technologies that would enable them to transform and speed up is what are the technologies and vendors and or organizations out there that have a unique value proposition in helping organizations deal with the realities of today, the themes of today, and some of the technical debt and other legacy issues. One such company is Neuron. And so when we find a company or a vendor that we think could have such a significant effect on clients of ours, we feel incumbent upon ourselves to tell our clients and to tout those technologies and vendors to the marketplace. So Neuron is a company that helps you overcome these unfortunate realities, be innovative, and speed up. And I want to now pass the mic to Tom and allow him to take you through the value proposition of Neuron and the capabilities that they have, and then we'll come back around and talk more about practical steps to accept new technologies into the enterprise toward the end. So Tom?
Great, thanks, Jeff. Appreciate that, and I think you've done a great job of framing some of the most critical challenges that are seen, in organizations today. We deal with large enterprise typically, and all of these types of issues rear their head at different times, at different parts of a project in the life cycle of the business. From an agenda point of view, what we have laid out for you is some discussion about innovation and the key enablers for helping organizations take advantage of the new technologies, but paying respect to the fact that they have a very significant installed base of proven legacy, quote-unquote, systems and capabilities. I'll transition then into a discussion about Neuron specifically and how we address many of the particular challenges that hold people back, as Jeff was indicating, where that blend of new and old is the critical transition point between where you are and where you may end up at some future date. I'll give a mini case study as well, just to make it real and tie it together in terms of a specific project example. And then I've got a couple of resources that we'll certainly point everyone to that I think is some great Gartner type information and other areas, white papers and such that amplify a lot of these same conversations. So with that, let's look at innovation. And the trick here is balance. I recall back to the 90s and Jim Collins and the Built to Last around the genius of the and, so to speak. The balance that needs to be achieved between what IT is and does and aspires to be with the business and those same sets of dynamics. How do you establish a healthy balance? And in many enterprises, the balance is not today healthy. But we are absolutely believing that these two organizations must work together effectively to make the business successful. On the IT side, there's the desire for control and centralization, security, predictability, etc. Absolutely paramount, particularly in the age of what you face and all those disruptive factors below. Hacking, M&A, outsourcing, non-traditional competitors. Striking that balance, I'll call it vertically on this page, just for IT is significantly challenging. At the same time, the business down the right side wants to be innovative. It wants to be dynamic. It wants to look at new business models, bring in new partners, new channels to market. And there's a whole wealth of new innovative technologies, social, mobile analytics, etc., that provide a tremendous amount of promise. The hard part, of course, is how to blend, how to leverage, and how to establish the appropriate balance so that you can conceive, design, all the way through deploying and optimizing new innovations, new ideas with the type of speed, agility, and low cost that really is required to make a business competitive with all of the competitive factors that face a modern organization today. So as we go on and look at what Neuron is all about, it's a different thought process, frankly. Today, in many cases, there's been a very strong, everything has to be centralized before I can create value. And there were good reasons for that. We went through, as I depict here at the bottom, we went through the ERP phase. We cleaned up a lot of transactional capabilities, unified a lot of the interactions. We then moved into the data warehousing, big data, analytics, and so forth. And the focus there was to create analytical value, which means I had to look at a lot of data and wanted to do that reasonably efficiently. The problem now, of course, is that things have exploded, particularly on the edge. New services, new sensors, right? IoT, we're just at the beginnings of that whole phenomenon. But the business model action now is about orchestration. It's about using the various assets that you have, that you can connect to, that you may get in the future. And how do you mix and match those in a very agile way to solve specific targeted business problems? and have the agility to respond to the tremendous amount of change that is thrown at you. That could be business, that could be infrastructure, that could be sources and destinations, partners, and so forth. The model that Neuron has brought to market is to provide this cross-platform orchestration without this keen reliance on centralization as a prerequisite for value creation. There are absolutely cases where a degree of centralization is needed, but in many, many use cases, one of which we'll cover shortly, you can actually orchestrate value across these disparate platforms and solve problems with a dramatically shorter time to value, and retain the high degree of agility that you need. So this depiction on the right about allowing each component of the solution perform a very specific component of that value, and then orchestrate across those and deliver results either incrementally along the way or perhaps at the end, but do that in a way that is very flexible, very agile, and much lower cost than those heavy prerequisites that we've typically seen. So let's go ahead and we'll walk through some of the key aspects of what Neuron is and does, and we'll decompose this just a degree further. First of all, our approach is to offer a fairly extensive library. There's over 50 different types of these objects that we call neurons. Frankly, they're configurable services. They do one thing, they do one thing very well, and with a pretty reasonable degree of configurability. The key is that all of these different types of neurons are completely interoperable. So as you want to map out a business solution, and in many cases, people start at the top and decompose the business problem down to the individual value-added steps that are required. Get data, analyze data, call an application, parse a file, talk to a website, etc. Those are each represented in this flow using a variety of neurons that are individually configured to do that one specific task or element of the end-to-end workflow. This gives you a great degree of flexibility, not only in terms of the speed to build, but also the agility to adapt, because individual neurons are performing a discrete set of actions, and you can individually go reconfigure or even swap out the type of neuron without disrupting the rest of the solution. And we'll hit some of those examples shortly. We have a pretty extensive variety of interaction neurons, which allow you to interact with the variety of sources and destinations that are in your environment. We have a set of analytics neurons that frankly can do native analytic using built-in capabilities. We can also import some of the work that might have been done, like a predictive model, and run it natively in a neuron. We can also call other platforms. If you've made investments, we're going to leverage those investments. The key is that by simply connecting these neurons together, you can stream those results from one neuron to the next, and orchestrate that value creation. We also have a set of output neurons. The key here is that you decide, if at all, and where, when, and how, you will deliver any specific results. You can decide at one point to kick out an email to someone. You could write it back to a database. You could create a file. You could do all of these. The flexibility is there so that you can tailor the way that value is delivered into your operations, to your people, to other systems, and so forth. At the bottom are really the key takeaways, right? We're abstracting a lot of the detailed technology elements underneath and allowing you to focus on the logical configuration of the work that you want done. The interoperability provides you the flexibility to mix and match at will. We isolate those various components, and very importantly, you can expand and extend these solutions very readily by simply creating additional branches through the networks and orchestrate these tangential results based on business rules and other orchestration components. This next component is, how do I build one of these solutions? So the Design Studio is a web application where the solution designer can select, configure, and connect individual neurons, sequence those to solve a specific business problem, can package that as a solution, can permission it at a very granular level to individuals or groups who have then the permissions to perhaps edit or only run, and have the flexibility, as we said, to extend over time the breadth of and the depth of what is done to solve a specific problem as you learn, frankly, and as you want to continue to extend and take account of new components of that business solution in your environment or requirements that are placed upon you. This is a straight web application, nothing on the desktop but a browser. We train you in a day. In that class, you are building early networks and exercising those so that you come out of that class ready to start crafting your own. And of course, we'll help you through that process and we'll be as involved as you'd like us to be. It's really the partnerships like Jeff and WGroup and others who can help with the implementation aspects. We're very flexible in that respect. The key is it's visually configured, very accessible to both subject matter experts in the business as well as IT business analysts and so forth, and has the granularity for the management control that IT requires, but the accessibility, ease of use that the business wants. Now, as we go to the next slide, we'll talk a bit about the physical deployment and the key plumbing aspects. We have built our own container. This is very much a microservices and container style of architecture. Our container has a great deal of value-added logic built within that, in a sense, abstracts much of the complexities and does the plumbing work, if you will, of connecting to, orchestrating, utilizing resources, and providing the environment within which neurons execute. You can have one cortex and have an entire solution running on it. You could have multiple. The key is that we've incorporated all of the appropriate disciplines for scaling, resiliency, security, configuration management, systems management, and so forth in one platform. Again, our goal when we built the platform was to simplify and speed up and allow you to focus on the solution aspects, not the underlying technical complexities. As we go to the follow-on slide, it talks about the physical deployment of the individual cortices, as we call them when they're plural. In this particular example, I have 3 deployed. They're running on different infrastructures, OSs, physical, virtual, and so forth. And with 2 clicks, you can position any neuron to run on any cortex. If you've installed multiple, you have the flexibility to mix and match where those cortices live and which neurons are assigned to run. So if you have data privacy issues by geographies, you could perform one portion of the work on a cortex in the appropriate geography, and only after a certain level of aggregation or such is completed, then it can be piped off to another part of your environment. You can scale horizontally by installing more cortices. You can individually scale these vertically. And we also have dynamic scaling capabilities where we can take advantage of AWS or other cloud environments and dynamically bring additional resource in for handling scenarios where there's a spike in workload generated by other applications, by any number of causes. So as we move on, right, we leverage this platform and provide a very productive environment to address real-life business problems. Let's take anti-money laundering investigations as an example. Today's scenario talks about the fact that these, frankly, big data analytics platforms called transaction monitoring systems will generate large volumes in many cases of potential anti-money laundering alerts. Unfortunately, the response to that workload is a large number of people who are manually performing a set of data gathering, data aggregation, analytics, scoring, and decision making by individually logging into disparate internal systems, external systems, copy, pasting, spreadsheeting, you name it, to try to roll together a targeted set of information to help them decide what the action is. Is this a false positive? And by the way, 95% of alerts that are generated by a TMS are false positives, but you have to investigate every one, frankly. So instead of spending 45 minutes, an hour, 2 hours to complete that investigation cycle, on the right side is what Neuron does. We will come in and work with the process owner, the best analysts, anyone else that's appropriate, and we will configure a series of neurons as a workflow that will read from the case management system as appropriate or receive it if pushed to us. We will orchestrate the interaction with the various internal systems and make those targeted inquiries, extract out those relevant results. We'll go and do the same thing with the external sources and use their APIs, their web services and such. We'll make targeted inquiries to things like WorldCheck, Dun & Bradstreet, Google, and so forth. We'll take those results. We'll perform various analyses. We'll bring all of those elements together, apply specific scoring models, and then present to an analyst the comprehensive set of information that has been collected, organized, and presented so that they can then focus immediately on decision making, at looking at targeted elements of that case, not spending the time manually gathering. We then, after their decision is made, and every single bank as well as the regulator wants a human in the loop, which is perfectly appropriate, we'll even help with the post-decision documentation and so forth, because frankly it's again a series of orchestrated steps interacting with a variety of platforms to finish the activity. Let me finish by saying how crucial it is that you have a repeatable, consistent process. That's what automation gets you. And in this particular case, as you see by that feedback loop on the top, because you now have a consistent, repeatable process doing these investigations, you can now harvest those results and feed those back in a proven way to the folks at the front end who are tuning those analytics that generate the alerts in the first place. So rather than a data scientist making their best guesses, and very informed guesses, frankly, now you can hold up to the regulator repeated proof of investigated cases that have been consistently evaluated and scored and analyzed, and can then feed that back and with justification then suppress those future alerts that are demonstrably going to be false positives. We did a significant project in just 4 weeks implementing exactly this approach, took the investigation cycle times down 50%. Significant productivity, as well as that consistency, repeatability, and frankly scalability that just isn't there on the people-intensive approach. All right, let's move on. The variety of use cases where Neuron can apply is quite broad. We are careful to say that, again, we're not a big data analytics stack producing insight. We really partner effectively at that point to operationalize that insight and help you leverage that to its fullest and realize the business value. We've done projects accelerating time to value dramatically. We've improved visibility across both internal and external sources of information. We've lowered cost of operations significantly through the automation aspects. We've deployed in partnership with other projects to provide acceleration, QA, tuning, and so forth, because our cycle of innovation is so much quicker that we can evaluate configuration opportunities or optimizations in advance of doing it once and for all in the final platform. So there's a variety of ways that we can help firms address the challenges, as Jeff laid out, of mixing legacy and new and accelerating with a much lower cost to succeed and a much faster cycle, so that you're not afraid of trying things and retrying things and retrying things to make sure that you get the improvements within that cycle time that you require. As I finish up, the next slide has a number of comments here about what innovation is all about. Being able to deploy in a hybrid fashion, take advantage of what you have and what you have access to. That mix of legacy and new, frankly of IT and business, about innovating on a continuous basis and not having to build a new complete bespoke solution. Instead, making very agile changes in a focused fashion and restoring that balance of true partnership between IT and business. as we wrap up, we've got a number of resources that we'll make sure are available to you. We think these are some strong thought leadership pieces from Gartner Group in particular. There's some additional detail on the Neuron platform and some recent news and some of the things that we've made commentary on in the market that we think are very, very important for firms who are trying to strike this balance, energize innovation, but do it in a way that has that appropriate IT business partnership. And then the last slide, of course, is some of the validations that we've been fortunate to receive from a variety of sources, and we're very appreciative of those just as an external vetting point. And certainly there's ample material on the web from these various organizations as well. So with that, thank you for your time, and I'll turn it back to Jeff for the next component.
Thanks, Tom. So in light of the inhibitors that I spoke about early on in the discussion, I think you can appreciate now why we're fans of Neuron for the obvious reasons stated on this slide. That when you're dealing with technical debt, it's great to find solutions that enable you to leverage the information that's out there in ways that remain keeping your infrastructure, applications, and data in a stable situation. Don't require major technical overhauls, don't require big centralization efforts like Tom discussed, and keeps the pain at a minimum threshold for you. Those are the kinds of things we like to recommend to clients. What I wanted to just finish up on is that typically people that are in IT leadership positions are flooded with new ideas. We run into this sort of issue all the time when how do you determine of all the new ideas coming your way how to accept the correct ones, and we recommend treating innovation as a process. And here's a very simple funnel chart, and there's lots of material that would go around this, but helping organizations set up processes that enable them to better accept, validate, test, prove, and then roll out various different types of innovation in their business, one of which would be solutions such as Neuron. I wanted to just put this out there as a very simple framework, obviously, but to discuss that it's a recommendation that we make, and it's a core service that we offer to support clients with. And then lastly, in similar sense, you want to move on and create a process where you can sustain the engine of innovation in your business, and that requires actually creating that engine that enables you to continuously accept business requirements, that enables you to unpack those business requirements by looking at the root causes and the myriad ways you could solve for those root causes after you've prioritized them using processes that I discussed on the prior. And those solutions can be different people skills, they can be different processes in the organization, or it can be different technology changes, and those technology changes can be straight through processing, integration, automation, new software. And inside of that toolkit of ways in which you drive innovation in the business, we firmly believe that Neuron is a perfect fit for that. So many of the use cases that would fit in your business that are similar to what Tom laid out, we believe that Neuron is a perfect fit for ways in which inside of your innovation engine you could speed that business cycle up that you have. And then lastly, I think the point I wanted to make in conclusion before we get into some questions and discussion is that the number one inhibitor to improving business speed and innovating is an organization's culture. And so by attending a webcast like this, the expectation is that the catalyst for this change then becomes you all on this call and your peers and your influence. And so I want to say thank you all for attending. And if you have any questions, put them in the window. I do have a few that I will get to and run through with Tom, but we want to make this as engaging as possible. So if you have additional questions, feel free to send them in. So I have a few questions already. So Tom, if you're quick on your feet, I'd rather you answer questions first before I answer any questions that are related to things that I think I'd answer. The first one is, so the people that are listening that are not in the money laundering business or money laundering detection business, what scenarios seem like a good fit for somebody to look at Neuron to pilot, to solve? How would they identify that?
Absolutely. There's a wealth of use cases. I'll give you a few examples. In the supply chain arena, more and more components of the supply chain have been outsourced. There's very distributed components of that chain, warehouses, distribution centers, and so on. One of the pilots that we did literally in one day was to bring together information from across a supply chain and give it the visibility that the ultimate owner wanted. So there's a variety of supply chain type examples. Another good set of examples is in the call center, right? If you think similar to an anti-money laundering alert, a customer calls a call center. Well, by the time you pick up the phone, of course, you want all of the information that's relevant to serving that customer at your fingertips, and you want to very quickly respond to inquiries that those customers make. So having a very fast and flexible way to access a breadth of systems, bring that information to bear in the serving process, another high-value scenario. Healthcare definitely has its own unique challenges with HIPAA and other requirements, but if you think about how distributed and disparate the components of a medical record are, that's a very rich area where we're working with partners who have special expertise in healthcare, but we think we can contribute nicely to helping bring information together to improve patient outcomes, customer service, and the like. So there's a few. But really, the building blocks are there to apply to any problem where you're faced with a, frankly, wide range of and an expanding universe of potential solution components. Just think IoT right off the top. You want to bring targeted elements together in an orchestrated way to enrich the decision-making and the orchestration of how you respond to those events. A whole wealth of things that could apply here. Thanks.
Okay, Tom, I have a three-part question. I'm going to run out the whole question.
Okay.
I have some comments that I'd like to make on the first two, and then I'd like to sort of allow you to weigh in on those as well, and then maybe take the third part. Since between the two of us, you're the guy who's been a CIO a couple times over. So the question is, can you discuss best practices around, one, selecting projects for rapid prototype, two, measuring success and failure, and three, deal with the friction between the business need for speed and the IT desire for control? And like I said, I wanted to comment on those first two. So the first is, how do you select projects for rapid prototyping? You discussed some of the criteria that are good for Neuron. I'd say when it comes to rolling out a center of excellence that evaluates different ideas that could come in for innovation deployment, as a consultant, I immediately see a 2x2 matrix in front of me with value on the left and ease of execution on the bottom, and then evaluating all of the opportunities to pilot against those two axes. And if you want to know how to measure value, there's only two ways. Way one is how much more revenue will it produce, and number two is how much will it lower our costs. So those are the two metrics that I would measure on that two axis against the bottom axis of ease of deployment. I also want to make one other point about measuring success. I just gave you a pretty stock answer for how you measure value for an IT project. I also just want to say that I believe that there's a space that needs to be filled by innovation labs in large enterprises that don't follow traditional metrics for success and failure that I just described, that you'll hear over and over again. I think it's a good idea to have a lab that's testing technologies at all times that don't have any traditional measures associated with them, to allow you to experiment to find out how they could have a value for your business. So I do think that for the bulk of where you put your time, energy, and muscle and investment, you should use traditional measures to 2x2 the ideas to determine what to pilot. But I also think you need to experiment with things that don't follow traditional measures to determine how they could affect your business. So, Tom, let me allow you to comment on those things.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're spot on. Project selection has always been a challenge. I categorize those different types of opportunities almost to a equivalent of basic research versus applied research. Right? To your point, a lab experimenting with very new things versus a much more targeted, value-intended experiment, so to speak, that's maybe addressing a very specific live problem where there's real money up for grabs, frankly. I think the value and ease of execution is a very appropriate way to present a very simple framework. What we talk about with customers a great deal is that ease of execution piece. Our story as a Neuron is we're trying to pretty dramatically shift where the dividing line is on that ease of execution axis, right, between fast, low cost, less complex versus longer, higher cost, more complex, right? In the traditional way, a lot more of your sample projects or possibilities fall into that bad end of the continuum, right? With an approach like Neuron, a lot more of those potential projects move much further left or to the easier end of that ease of execution. So we're trying to open the envelope of good, sound candidates that can be executed still within that same framework. Because honestly, when I was running IT organizations and so on, everything we did had a purpose. That purpose, to your exact point, Jeff, was revenue up, costs down, safety up, environmental impact down, or, frankly, something that would teach us and enable us in a platform kind of thinking way or a foundational way to do future things better. Because there are some things that need to be done that don't immediately produce better revenue, better costs, and so on, but they're critical enablers. And if you categorize those, you can't do just those types of projects, nor should you only do just the ones that drive cost down. But having a good mix in a conscious way gives you the kind of balance, I think, within that, that really can pay dividends. And then the last part was the friction. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I was gonna push in that direction. Yeah. The last part, you did address it in your presentation, but I think let's come back and circle around on that again. How do you advise on dealing with this issue of friction between the business speed and IT control? Of course, WGroup consults on that, and so we have our own point of view, but I'd love your sort of first-person point of view, having been in the chair.
Yeah, I think at the end of the day, the credibility of the IT organization is paramount. I always had a simple equation. I said alignment plus execution equals credibility. And if you've established credibility with your business customer, you get the latitude to try things, and you get the willingness to partner. When there isn't that connection, then there's a huge temptation for the business to go off and try things on their own and kind of do it in the shadows and all those other things. I think you have to take this pretty head on, right? I think there has to be a candid assessment of the degree of credibility and engagement that your IT organization has with the business. Get to the heart of why it is where it is, and if it's not where it needs to be, do some concerted actions to establish that. Start with small steps. This is not an overnight change, but by simply connecting with the business leaders that are the most influential, that have the most resources to share with you and work with you, and helping them see that your vested interest is making them successful, I've seen tremendous things come from that. But the only way to deal with that friction is to take it head on. You can't do it in isolation. Jeff, please.
Agreed. I think I wouldn't pile on too much. I would add that in the spirit of creating co-innovation together with the business in a lab-like or center of excellence-like fashion, there's a number of cases where I've seen the business and IT partner on achieving innovations to try to get to the outcome that they're after, and doing that collaboratively and together.
Yeah, exactly, because when IT goes off in the corner and kind of says, well, we're looking at stuff, right? The business loses visibility to that. They feel like they're not involved. They don't know what's coming when, and they feel like, well, if anything's going to happen, I need to go do it myself, right? Make them a part of it, right? Invite them into the process and have them contribute, frankly, their expertise, which is critical, right? You don't have time to sort of wander around hoping you find an oasis. It's a lot better to know that the vector is east because the business person is there helping you understand, what direction innovation is really going to pay off.
Right, right. Okay. I think we beat that one up pretty good. If there's any follow-ups, feel free to send that along our way. There was a related one that talks about how to effectively enable change management and get people to think and work differently for the types of changes that we are talking about here. I think, in answering that question, I go back to a very accepted, I think the way in which you should encourage change in your organizations is to go back to tried and true methods. And that's leaders communicating why a change is necessary, developing the organizational skills that would support the change, reinforcing or setting up reinforcement mechanisms and incentives that would enable people to be incentivized to adopt and accept the change. And then lastly, to my point I was making earlier in the presentation about culture, that the actions of the leaders in an enterprise is the #1 driver of culture, not even just like the #1 by a mile, like 80% of the driver of the culture. And that if you want to achieve a change, the actions and the role models that the leaders are conveying to the organization is very important to those 4 prongs. Any comments on that, Tom, before we go to the next?
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, this is a very challenging topic, right? It's people-centric at its heart. And
Right.
Enticing people and incenting people to try new, different things is not an easy proposition in many cases, right? It does absolutely come down to the tone that is set from the top on down, how you establish the right balance, right, and so forth, how you reward people who take intelligent risks, right? And you got to have the word intelligent in that. But again, you can start this on a very small scale, right? And be, frankly, a leader in helping a broader organization achieve that level of innovation and so on that everyone needs. Try those practices, germinate those good ideas, continue to build out that sphere of influence, and promote those kinds of practices. And clearly, the HR community is a key partner in this. Right? I always viewed IT as a great job because we had connections into everyone. And I could tap into my HR partner who might be supporting IT, and I could pick their brain around change management and all of the skills they bring to the table, and helping them help us to be a better organization, both internal to IT and beyond.
Okay, we're running tight. I have one here that is specific to you, Tom, and that's in my words that so I'm going to put my words around this a little bit. In the RPA technology world, it's very dependent on the infrastructure that it sits on, and anytime something changes, then the technology that sits on top of it is affected. And so can you talk to us a little bit about how Neuron responds to changes that happen to the infrastructure beneath it?
Sure.
Over time?
Absolutely. So, and to make a distinction, when I think of robotic, I think about presentation layer integration, right? Other people define robotic as just simply an automated process, right? So it doesn't matter about the definition, but all of those elements are in the mix here. The response to change is a crucial component, right, of innovation, of just serving your customer well as an IT organization. The spirit of what Neuron is about is very much from the ground up built to have the agility to respond to different types of change very effectively. For example, our container, that Cortex, it runs in a virtual or physical machine. Frankly, the neurons don't know or care about what's underneath. So if you all of a sudden have a cloud push and you want to move the hosting out to a cloud environment, it's incredibly straightforward to do that. As sources or destinations change, right, in this particular workflow that's being executed, you go to the specific neuron and do a very targeted reconfiguration using drop downs and text boxes and things, not writing code, to change an API call or change the parameters of that API call or change the data elements that are queried and so forth. So we've engineered this so that each component of the workflow can be very rapidly configured or reconfigured to respond to the changes from underneath or from above, and allow you in a very rapid incremental fashion to deal with what hits you, frankly, every day. Something is changing. But you know, the individual aspects of the workflow you know, can be in a very targeted way matched to that change and without impact on the rest of the workflow. It's a very appropriate question, right? I mean, things are changing every day, some component of what you're dealing with.
Yeah, that's the theme, right? Things are changing every single day. They're speeding up. They're getting faster. That's why we appreciate everybody for attending this webcast to learn a little bit about our two companies and our experiences and the technology that Neuron has brought to market. Thank you again for attending. As I mentioned earlier, we will send all of the attendees a recording link to this so that you can share it with colleagues, of course. And if you want to get in contact with myself or Tom, our contact information is up here, and we'll also follow up with each of you with that information as well. So we look forward to seeing you out on the trail. Thank you again for attending, and we look forward to being in touch with all of you in the future. Have a good day. Thank you. Thank you, Tom, as well.
All right. Thank you, Jeff, and thank you, everyone, for your time. Greatly appreciate it. Look forward to ongoing conversations.